This episode discusses women's reproductive medicine and so may not be appropriate for younger listeners or those who are sensitive to this topic.
Did you see Jack's Immaculate frogs? I do wish he would produce a baby for me in the same way.
It's 1921. Belle de Costa Green is 41, unmarried, childless, and wistful for motherhood. She's captivated by the headline-making experiments of biologist Jack Loeb, who developed frogs from eggs without fertilization by sperm, essentially creating a virgin birth. In a way, Belle saw the potential his research had, which eventually laid the groundwork for later advancements in reproductive biology, including IVF techniques used in human fertility treatments today. Perhaps motherhood was on her mind because for the first time in years, Belle was experiencing a relatively quiet period in her career and life. World War I was over, and the establishment of the Morgan Library as a public institution with her at its helm was a few years in the future.
Olive complexion, green eye reflection, proud black lady, but maybe not in detection. Not cause neglection, we're talking early 1900s. Her moms chose to pass, kids took direction. Belle de Costa Green is the queen librarian. Born Marion Greener, but she went contrarian. See, her father was Harvard educated and black. In fact, the first to get that stat, so better know that.
I'm Anne-Marie Eze, a librarian at Harvard University.
And I'm Rachel Lowell Ellison, a leadership expert and executive coach.
This is Boss Like Belle, a podcast in which I seek inspiration from the life of the legendary American librarian Belle de Costa Green and dare myself and you to lead fearlessly like her.
Join us as we unpack the learnings and insights from the parallel lives of two Black women navigating the very white space of professional librarianship, a century apart.
Portuguese background was for a stellar mind. It also should be noted, Belle was kind of fine.
Episode 3, Immaculate Frogs.
I think I've figured out what is so captivating about Belle's journey as a leader. At every juncture, at every moment where someone else might see an obstacle, she sees possibilities. And this example of her talking about the possible future technologies that would be developed is such a wonderful illustration of how she sees the world. She gets curious and expansive about what reality could be instead of being stifled by what it's not. So I think it's quite amazing that she sees a way to make the unlikely happen again and again.
You know what really stood out to me, Rahel? Not only what she wrote, and just for all the reasons that you just said, but who she wrote it to here. So she wrote this wish to have a baby without a man to a friend of hers, the American art historian Bernard Berenson. Mm-hmm. But they were former lovers. Mm-hmm. And not only that, a decade earlier, they had conceived a child together during a romantic clandestine holiday. Wow. But they couldn't keep their baby because Berenson was married to another woman and they were not married to each other. And in those days, being an unmarried mother carried a huge social stigma. And so they decided to terminate their pregnancy. So it's amazing to me that she puts as just an aside amongst other things that she was discussing in this letter to him that, I wish that I could use this new emerging technology to have a baby. I'm just like,
yeah.
I'm speechless,
it's mind-blowing.
To be quite honest, right?
Sure.
It's not like she wrote that to a girlfriend or to another friend who they didn't have this fraught history. Right. She wrote it to the man whose baby they chose together to abort. Unbelievable.
Completely undaunted.
And the other thing that's incredible, so she writes this in 1921 in May, and just a few months later, her wish to become a mother without having a husband actually comes true. Talk about manifesting.
Yeah.
So she becomes a mother because her sister, who had been widowed in First World War a couple of years earlier, she remarried. And when she remarried, she asked Belle to care for and take in permanently her own child. So Belle essentially became a mother through adoption of her own nephew. And then she, poured all of her love, affection, attention, and resources into raising her nephew as her own child.
Wow. That's quite a remarkable story. What's amazing is just she continues, to speak her mind about what she wants and to be focused on what she wants and build her career in the way she wants. But there's a certain amount of surrender to, who knows what will happen. And then the universe kind of came through for her, as you said, talk about manifesting, right? She had this journey that was not straightforward, that was roundabout, but she got to this wonderful, loving place in her life. And I'm wondering, as you think about your journey to motherhood, if there's anything that resonates there for you.
There is so much that resonates for me. It's, again, this sense of this kind of like uncanniness between the parallels in our lives. So first of all, we both became first-time mothers at the age of 41, right? So that's one parallel. Also during pandemics. So Spanish flu is going on when she takes in her nephew, and I gave birth to my son at the height of the pandemic. So that's another incredible parallel.
True.
Also, and this is something so private that I haven't really shared with many people, and it seems kind of crazy to be even maybe sharing this in a podcast. I also had an unplanned pregnancy that I chose not to take forward. So, and also when I was ready to become a mother, when I was married to my husband and, feeling like I'm at the right point in my life, I struggled with infertility. It took years. It took years. It took near-death experiences.
Wow.
So much happened. And, in the end, I finally did become a mother through IVF. The technology
that she was describing.
That Belle anticipated would happen
Unreal.
At some point. So I had to talk about this.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you did share that from your experience. And I think it's really, I'm processing it. I'm taking in all the similarities and all of the sort of parallel emotional tracks that you have been on. It's just, it's remarkable.
It is. Yeah. I'm processing that. I'm even talking about this in this context, but yeah, that's my truth. That's my story. Discovering this shared experience that Belle and I had inspired me to reconnect with my fertility fairy godmother, an incredible woman called Rosanne Austin. Rosanne explained in her own words.
Hey, gorgeous. If you want success on your fertility journey, you've got to have the mindset for it. I'm your host, Rosanne Austin, Fertility Mindset Master.
Welcome to the Fearlessly Fertile Podcast, episode 73. And Anne-Marie, thank you for being here with us.
Rosanne, thank you so much. I was going into the hospital at this point every other day so they could monitor the situation. And they started to suspect it was an ectopic. And, the way that you deal with an ectopic is you have to essentially end the pregnancy. So they recommended that to us. And I was like, no, what if there's a chance? Please. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. Just please let me just wait a few more days. So I begged them to let me, wait a few more days just in case there was a mistake. So, a few days later, I suddenly just didn't feel great and saw that I was bleeding. So I knew that this was not good. This was an emergency. And I took myself to the hospital and, they said to me, okay, now, the pregnancy is ruptured. This is extremely dangerous. You can bleed to death, And I still said, are you sure? And we just said, can we have a moment of privacy to think about this? And they were actually banging on the door saying, you don't have time. So they whisked me away to the operating room. And I remember being in there and they'd already started to put me under with the anesthesia. And then someone said, "Oh my God, wait, we haven't put an ID band on her. Can you confirm your name, your husband's name and his phone number?" They were in such a rush. And that was the last thing I remember.
Well, I get chills listening to that now. That's me in 2020 speaking about a particularly harrowing moment in my 5-year struggle to have a baby. Ultimately, with the support of Rosanne and my infertility sisters called the Baronesses, and of course my husband, I had a healthy pregnancy and gave birth to a child later that very year. So I'm thrilled to turn the tables and interview my fertility fairy godmother and dear friend on Boss Like Belle. Welcome, Rosanne.
Well, thank you for having me, Anne-Marie. I'm absolutely delighted to be here.
So, Rosanne, can you explain what your mission in life is?
I am a former California state prosecutor turned fertility coach. Basically, I help women all over the world get and stay pregnant.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you reach these women? I first came across you on your Fearlessly Fertile podcast.
The podcast is the way that I reach so many women, as well as through my books. And my mission in all of this, Anne-Marie, I want to help 100,000 women have 100,000 babies. And it's all about helping women make that dream come true.
That's a big number, and I know you can do it. How many women have you helped to date?
You know, it's so funny because I think back when I started, I was just so happy to help one. And then it really started to snowball. I mean, I would say conservatively in the thousands. My goal at this point is to 10x that impact and really create something that is helping women change their lives, not just from a fertility perspective, but for them to get in touch with their own power again and see that anything is possible.
That's fantastic. And actually, one of the reasons why I invited you onto this podcast is because of the skills that I learned from you. They were truly transformative and transferable. And I often find myself thinking, oh, well, what would Rosanne say? And what would Belle say? So bringing you both together in this episode is going to be dynamite.
Well, it's a sincere honor. Now that I've gotten to know Belle's story, I'm honored to be in that shared space. I think that she would be somebody just thrilling and quite a kick to hang out with. So we'll do that in spirit.
One big takeaway I got from you is the power of mindset. Could you talk about how your method applies to fertility and to the bigger picture?
Yeah, well, this was all born out of my own 7-year struggle with fertility. But when a professional woman like ourselves starts to want to have a family, knocking on 40, it's like the door slams shut. A lot of people will give us 1,000 reasons why we can't instead of the one reason why we can. And I realized on my own journey that I had been handing so much of my power over to professionals that didn't really know me. And I was allowing their fear, their doubt, their negativity to influence what I thought was possible for me. And I was like, I was doing all the physical things. But what I realized was there was this gaping hole in my strategy. So once I started to change the way that I thought, really reframed the way that I saw myself, reframed the way that I saw this journey, I got pregnant naturally after 7 years of trying countless treatments, being told I needed a donor egg. I was pregnant naturally and had my son naturally at almost 44.
So you already started helping other women before you became pregnant with your son, Asher?
Yes.
That's bold, Rosanne. That's really bold.
It was bold for sure, but I knew that it worked, that it felt wrong not to share it. And then when I saw what was happening, I was like, holy smoke, it isn't just me, it's them too. And then the rest is history because the results my ladies were creating just...
Yep, and I'm living proof of that. What do you remember about the first times we spoke and met in person?
So the first time we met on the phone, I remember you were wildly charming. And I said, I love this woman. I cannot
Really?
explain why I love her, but she's my people. I'm very judicious about who I work with, Anne Marie. There's something truly magical about being invited into a woman's life. In Kismet, there has to be a connection where I really believe that she can do what she says she's going to do. And then when we met in person at one of my retreats, interestingly enough in Boise, Idaho, it just brought everything together. I'm personally, and it was like it came full circle.
Yeah, I have such fond memories of both of these experiences as well, especially going all the way to Boise.
Yeah, nobody gets to Boise, Idaho by accident. It's
And what kind of women are drawn to you? And
lovably type A, a little bit control freaky, in recovery from, but very driven, women that are curious, well educated, and really in a place where they understand that there's more. They just don't know how to get there. But what we have in common is an insatiable desire to learn, to be better, to have our babies, and to live a very full life, much like Belle.
so I'm glad you're bringing up Belle. The inspiration for this episode is her wish in the 1920s to use emerging artificial reproductive technology to have a baby by herself. What do you make of that?
I mean, that just, it signals to me that indeed she was ahead of her time in so many different ways. And she's also a reflection of what modern women who had careers like she did and who wanted to live differently as she did, but still were committed to the very feminine desire to have a family. And I think those thoughts were probably shared by a lot of people, but she had the courage to speak them.
So when Belle wrote that, she was 41. What are your thoughts on high-achieving women becoming mothers later in life and the impact on their careers?
Motherhood offers for women at that stage in their lives is truly a sense of groundedness and connection to this feminine calling that we have really shackled women into this idea that you have to choose one or the other, when the essence of our freedom is our ability to say both, but that we can have very developed and expansive professional lives and at the same time honor that feminine longing.
I love that you emphasize femininity. Belle strategically played up her femininity in her male-dominated field. Could you say more about the power of femininity for working women?
So when I speak about femininity, I'm not talking about gender stereotypes. I think personal mastery is truly being able to marshal the masculine and the feminine within you.
In addition to the power of mindset, you taught me about the benefits of journaling. And Belle kept diaries, which she destroyed before she passed to prevent others from reading them. But in one of her letters, she refers to them in a fascinating way. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about her journaling practice and what it says to you.
My diary is a series of blotches only. I can't tell you how I love that diary. It is just as though it were another Belle and such a comforter. I write all the things I don't dare say. Awful things, impossible things, nasty, hateful, spiteful things. Generally very amusing to me. Last night, I went to bed at 10 o'clock and read my diary for the last 3 months. Well, I was amused, a bit amazed, and very much discomforted to find out how rapidly I outgrow my feelings. It does not seem possible that I, today, am the same person who penned these lines 3 months ago. The only comforting thought I had given me was that in most instances I had broadened, developed, and grown a bit. But it was a shock to find that people and things which had loomed so big to me then, had been of such insistent importance, were mere gray shadows now. I seemed to be marching on, and they stood way back where I had left them.
There's so much there.
There is so much there, but I think she's really drawing our attention to the power of giving to ourselves by processing what is going on for us and taking it out of our heads and putting it out onto the page. There's a catharsis to that I think allows us to have the kind of personal growth and peace that is required to move into the next season in our lives. Because that's basically what she was saying. 3 months before, she could hardly recognize who that person was.
Yeah, that's so true. Where her words resonated, particularly for me, was letting go of giving too much importance to what others think of you. That's something I've worked on for myself, and it is so liberating.
Yeah, I mean, her just being able to observe and to describe what she did in that way, I mean, it demonstrates a real presence of mind and understanding of herself, which undoubtedly she gained by doing things like journaling.
Well, as you know, Belle was passing as white publicly. So who knows what else she was writing in her diaries in private and processing on a daily basis to be able to lead this risky double life.
She probably had a lot of other practices that she did that helped keep her grounded. And because she was basically straddling two worlds on many different levels. I mean, it's remarkable. If I was able to have a conversation with her, I would dearly want to know what she believed in the darkest moments. What were the things that she had to believe to pull herself through? Like, what was her core belief that she held on to in order to be able to become this woman that she became? I'd like, I'd say, Belle, if you could tell me in 10 words or less what that was, I would love it, because I'm ready to write it down. And the second thing, when I think about boss like Belle, it really is, it seems to me, this interesting combination of loving the vision that you have for your life so much that you are willing to embody it, even when you're frightened or when things seem terrible. It takes a very strong person to be able to maintain that. And she manifested the world that she wanted to live in. Like, she became that. She is the essence of having a vision for yourself, understanding the qualities that this highest version of Belle was. And she just made it her reality.
Even from a young age, she had a clear vision for her life and achieved it against all odds.
The other lesson that I take from Belle and the way that she bossed was this really fearless authenticity. And I really hope that anyone listening here is going to really grab onto that lesson, because what I've learned over the decade plus that I've been doing this work, it's like the more uniquely you become, the easier it is for your people and your babies to find you.
That's so true. Rosanne, thank you so much. This has been incredible, and it feels wonderful having you on my podcast this time around. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us.
Your conversation with Rosanne was such a compelling reminder of how women, despite any challenges we're facing in the workplace, find ways to reconcile, to synthesize professional aspirations with their personal life goals. And listening to you talk about your journey and reflecting on Belle's reminds me of how far we've come. You know, the frog dream is real. You know, I couldn't help but think about the leadership skills that when we transition to these new roles in our lives as parents, as caregivers, that we develop almost innately. So many competencies: emotional intelligence, adaptability, communication. Those are the qualities we look for in leaders, and parenthood helps shepherd those skills into being, right? So how would you say your experience, your transition to motherhood has enhanced your leadership approach?
I think that's a great question. And it actually reminds me of what my boss said to me when I shared that I was pregnant. So I was a little nervous, and I told him that I was expecting, and this smile just spread over his face, and then looked me in the eye and said, "This is going to be so good for you." And
as a leader.
And
I didn't know what he meant, to be quite honest, but now I do.
Yeah. Well, you know that what's funny is that I wrote an article about the power of that response. His response, that basically by responding with that level of enthusiasm, engagement, positivity, you can actually see the impact on your career in, months and years into the future. In other words, if he had responded differently, actually you would see more disengagement in employees who, after they'd given birth, right? So he actually planted a seed of growth, or helped usher along your growth just by having that positive reaction.
That is amazing. And it does make a lot of sense to me. And it also actually plays into kind of like what happened next in the story.
Yeah.
Because if you remember when you and I first met and I just accepted my promotion, the main reason why I was feeling ambivalent about it was because I had a little baby at home.
Right.
And I was loving the role I was already in and thought, I can just coast for a little while I'm finding my feet as a mother. But he did plant that seed, I guess. And I don't know if he knew that this opportunity was coming up, but it felt like a genuine response. And it did make me feel just better about being there, like being in that particular workplace, and that I could do both things.
Amazing. And that framing, we were talking earlier about how Belle is able to see possibilities where other people see obstacles. I think, you saw the possibilities. I think what you and Belle have in common is really this joint ability, this matching ability to make things happen in the world, right? But it had already been framed to you that this transition in your life would enhance your ability to multitask, to resolve conflicts, to
negotiate,
right? But when you think about emotional intelligence, multitasking, negotiation, how have you seen that play out in your career?
But I think one of the biggest changes for me at work after becoming a mother is that I'm less in my own head all the time, right?
Yeah.
I feel like beforehand, I would often be like paralyzed by worrying about what other people thought of me or how certain actions would be like perceived or received. And now it's not like I don't care about those things, but I'm just more decisive. And I think that has to do with having less time and just being like really, really careful about my time and having more boundaries in place. And so I just move faster, I would say, and my brain moves faster, as it were, because I'm not so hung up on some of these insecurities that I had before.
Yeah. I think there's a way in which we as parents, also a mother, how we learn to keep a cool head, right? When you're managing the well-being of other people, whether that's as a parent, whether that's as a leader, right? Parents are facing enormous stresses. The Surgeon General released an advisory on the mental health and well-being of parents, saying essentially that parents report high stress levels compared to non-parents, that it's so overwhelming to keep a handle on the immense stress that parents feel, right? And does that resonate with you?
It resonated with me personally because, both my husband and I are expats. We're raising our family here in the United States, far away from our own family and, like our old friends. And so, we've done a lot of community building to put in place the kind of structures or support that we need.
I mean, something that we've struggled with for a long time in the US is this idea of the ideal worker stereotype. So we have a workplace that, even though it's changing in so many different ways, was designed around certain gender dynamics, certain workplace norms that have no relationship to the reality that we're living right now. So the Joan C. Williams, who's the founding director of the Center for Work-Life Law at University of California, Hastings, she's talked about the ideal worker is a man who starts to work in early adulthood and continues to work full-time and overtime for 40 years straight, taking no time off for childbearing or child rearing. That has no bearing on where we are today, given that 70% of American families have all adults participating in the workforce. So, I think what is interesting about the Surgeon General Advisory is that it's a recognition that this is a systemic problem. It's on the parent to kind of, use the resources that are available to them and navigate the kind of crazy maze of working parenthood. And, what's amazing about Belle's story is how she just operated almost outside of that and was able to create this timeline for parenthood, this experience of parenthood that was so unique.
Yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about how she did that, how she raised her nephew, Bobby, while having a, high-flying career and traveling and etc. So, she was doing well for herself, right?
Yeah.
Compared to many other women in New York. And so she had, her mother lived with her. So she was able to be really hands-on with raising what was, her own grandchild, obviously. They also had paid help. So they had maids who worked in their home, who also provided childcare. And then she packed him off to boarding school at a certain point. So Belle, in order to be a single working mum, she put in place an infrastructure to help her with both family help, paid help, and then by putting Bobby into boarding school and sending him to some very nice schools. He was very well educated on the money, using the money that she was earning.
Belle's story, your journey, and so many other women's experiences, women that your fertility godmother has worked with, show us that integrating parenting skills into leadership isn't just a possibility, it's also a huge asset. And we need more leaders like you who can embrace their full selves and challenge these outdated norms and systems and put together lives that are expansive and open to what's possible. And so I want to thank you for modeling that. What advice would you give to our listeners as they're hearing your story? Maybe they haven't yet become mothers, parents themselves, but they're listening to your story and Belle's and thinking about what they should take away as a parent.
Because it's about a juggling act, to be quite honest, right?
Sure.
And sometimes it forces you to come up with really creative strategies. So, for example, anyone who knows what it's like to go to a black hair salon, usually on a weekend, you can spend hours there. It's like a sinkhole. You go in, you emerge hours later looking fabulous, but also the sun has come down in the meantime, right? Often in hair salons, they'll do multiple clients' hair at the same time, and everyone's chatting to each other. It's a wonderful sense of community, but you can spend several hours of your life there. I can't do that anymore now that I'm a mum, right? And so a strategy that I came up with, which is working so well for me, is because thanks to flex work, basically. And so, I'm able to work a couple of days a week remotely. And every few weeks, I'm not working remotely from my house. I'm working remotely from the hair salon.
Oh, nice.
And by going during the week, there are fewer clients. I'm in and I'm out in a very short period of time. And my hairstylist knows I'm combining it with work. So we have this routine down. I drive there in my lunch break, right? And I sit down and she starts shampooing. While she's shampooing my hair, obviously I can't work. So we talk. That's when we gossip. I ask her how her grandkids are. She asks me how my family is. And then as soon as I'm under the dryer or she's braiding my hair, I get out my laptop and I have what's known in the hair salons as a silent service. So she doesn't talk to me again after that, other than when I'm paying and saying thank you and leaving at the end of it.
Oh, wow.
And I get out my laptop and I'm working, or I get out an article, or I basically organize that one afternoon every couple of weeks around being able to combine these two things. So if I need to do some reading for my job, or I need to do some writing or even just kind of like going through like emails, I can do that from the hair salon. For like 2 hours, I'm in and I'm out. And that means I can show up at work looking presentable. And to be quite honest, I'm able to combine it in doing just a little something for me, which is really hard to do as a parent.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back to a theme that comes up with leadership, is this very external view. And while that's important, you have to be centered in yourself and take care of what's needed. And it sounds like that experience in the hair salon is an opportunity for you to make sure you're taking care of what needs to be taken care of for yourself, help you feel confident and calm and collected, and you're doing the work.
Oh, absolutely. And the sense of community in the salon is like a safe space for me as well, because, I do work in like a predominantly white institution and profession. And for those 2 hours every few weeks, I'm in an all Black environment, which is not my usual lived experience. So from that point of view as well, it's also incredibly restorative. And there are other professional Black women who are doing the same thing. We're all doing the same thing that we need to do to get our, balance all aspects of our lives together.
Olive complexion.
That's all for this episode of Boss Like Belle. Next time, we'll be hearing how Belle inspired me to provide sanctuary and a platform to persecuted scholars in exile. You'll be meeting an Indigenous scholar from Manipur, Binalakshmi Nekram, who's a women's rights and disarmament activist and former fellow of the Harvard Scholars at Risk program.
Oh my God, if I meet Belle today, I would I know that my heart already, even meeting now, fills my heart with so much of warmth and light that I would thank her for her courage, for her vision, and for her love for a community that she was transcending communities, nations to support. And I would tell her, Belle, you have done your bit. We will continue to do what you have done. You are a trailblazer, and we will continue this path.
It also should be noted, Belle was kind of fine.
Created by Anne-Marie Eze. Hosted by Anne-Marie Eze and Rachel Lowell-Ellison. Produced by Anne-Marie Eze and Diego Senor, executive producer at Les Central Podcasts. Edited by Nicole Pizarro at Les Central Podcasts. Sound engineers Clayton Scoble and Brian Leach at Harvard Library. Special consultants Philip Palmer and Erica Chalela, co-curators of the exhibition Belle DaCosta Green, A Librarian's Legacy, the Morgan Library and Museum. Belle's voice is performed by Erica Chalela from the Morgan Library and Museum. Thanks to Rosanne Austin for permission to include a segment from her Fearlessly Fertile podcast. Episode 73, A Miracle 5 Years in the Making, available to hear in full wherever you get your podcasts. The Ballad of Belle DaCosta Green, composed and performed by Big Piff and under license from Big Piff. All other songs are from Pixabay.com platform. Cinematic Emotional Drama by Sam Francis, Sleep Music, Volume 16, and Volume 17 by Piotr Witowski, Meditation Music by Dana Music. Cover art by Scott Murray, based on a photograph of Belle DaCosta Green by Clarence H. White, 1911, courtesy of the Biblioteca Berenson, Itati, the Harvard University Center for the Italian Renaissance Studies. The Boss Like Belle podcast is also supported by the Morgan Library and Museum and made possible by the generous support of Harvard Library, whose commitment to fostering knowledge and research enables the sharing of ideas and scholarship with the broader community.